The dream always started the same way. A bathroom, not mine, with cool marble countertops and a mirror fogged with steam. I'd reach out, my hands strangely slender, and wipe a clean circle in the condensation. And there she'd be, a girl with my eyes, but not my face. Her hair was the color of honey, long and spilling over her shoulders. Her lips, full and pink, trembled as if she were about to speak, or maybe cry. I'd wake up tangled in my sheets, my heart hammering against my ribs, my entire body drenched in a cold sweat. But it wasn't the fear that lingered. It was a strange, terrifying echo of sensation on my skin, a feeling of softness, of a different shape, of a form that felt alien and yet, in a way that made my stomach twist, felt icky, right. My name is Alex, or it was back then. I was a computer science major at the State University. My world was logical, built on lines of code and the predictable hum of a server room. I was quiet, introverted, the kind of guy who sat in the back of the lecture hall and slipped out the second the professor dismissed the class. I had one friend, Megan, who had somehow broken through my shell in freshman year and decided I was worth the effort. To everyone else, I was just background noise. But inside my own code was a mess of bugs and conflicting commands. I was haunted by a fascination, an obsession with the very idea of being female. It was my secret, shameful corner of the universe. I'd spend hours scrolling through makeup tutorials on YouTube, mesmerized by the way a brush could soften a jawline or a liner could change the shape of an eye. I had a folder on my phone, buried deep and password protected, filled with screenshots from those gender-swapping apps. I'd stare at the female version of myself for so long my eyes would burn. The girl in the app looked a lot like the girl in my dreams. Sometimes, the urge would become a physical ache, a pressure in my chest that wouldn't go away. On those nights, I'd lock my dorm room door, pull down the blinds, and retrieve a small hidden box from the back of my closet. Inside was a simple navy blue sundress I'd bought from a thrift store. My heart pounding the entire time, I'd slip it on, the cheap cotton rough against my skin, for a few glorious, terrifying minutes. I'd stand in the dark, feeling the fabric swish around my knees. And then, inevitably, a wave of self-loathing would crash over me. I'd rip the dress off, shove it back in the box, and hate myself for being so weak, so wrong. What kind of guy did this? It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and drizzling, when everything changed. I was hunting for props for a student film project, something about a retro-futuristic detective. I needed an old-fashioned clock, maybe a vintage lamp. I was cutting through a part of town I rarely visited, a narrow street lined with brick buildings and forgotten businesses. When I saw it, the shop didn't have a flashy sign, just a small, swinging placard with faded gold letters, The Gilded Cage. The name should have been a warning, but something pulled me toward it. The air inside was thick and still, smelling of old wood, decaying paper, and something else, something sweet and spicy, like incense. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light slanting through the grimy front window. Shelves overflowed with a chaotic collection of antiques tarnished silver, chipped porcelain dolls with vacant eyes, leather-bound books with cracked spines. It was less a store and more a mausoleum of forgotten things. Behind a cluttered counter stood a person I couldn't immediately categorize. They were tall and slender, with a cascade of dark hair braided with silver threads. Their face was a collection of elegant angles, and their eyes, when they lifted them to meet mine, were a startling, pale silver. They wore a velvet vest over a loose, cream-colored silk shirt. "Can I help you find something?" Their voice was a low, melodic hum that held no distinct gender. It just was. "Oh, I'm just looking," I stammered, feeling like an intruder. "People rarely just look in here," they said, a faint smile playing on their lips. "They're usually looking for something they don't know they've lost." I gave a weak, awkward laugh and started browsing, my hands shoved deep in my pockets. My eyes scanned over brass telescopes and boxes of yellowed photographs, but nothing held my attention. I was about to make a polite exit when my gaze landed on a small velvet-lined tray on the counter. In the center of it, lying on the faded fabric, was a locket. It was silver, tarnished with age, and no bigger than my thumb. An intricate design of a pair of open wings was carved into its surface. It was beautiful, but it was the feeling it gave me that stopped me in my tracks. It felt resonant, like a tuning fork had been struck somewhere deep inside me. The shopkeeper, who I would later learn was named Wren, seemed to follow my gaze. "That piece is quite old," they said, their voice soft. "It has a unique property." "Oh yeah," I asked, trying to sound casual. "Does it tell time?" Wren's silver eyes fixed on me, and for a second, I felt completely transparent, like they could see every secret I'd ever kept. "In a way," they replied, "it is said to reveal the true form of the wearer's soul." I couldn't help but let out a short, skeptical laugh. It sounded like the kind of mystical sales pitch you'd hear in a fantasy movie. Right, the true form of my soul. The smile on Wren's face faded, replaced by an expression of serene intensity. They leaned forward slightly, their silver eyes never leaving mine. You'd be surprised what a soul looks like when it's not forced into a cage it doesn't belong in. They paused, and their next words hit me with the force of a physical blow. "Perhaps you aren't entirely you, Alex." My breath caught in my throat. They had said my name. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I hadn't introduced myself. A cold dread, mingled with a wild, inexplicable hope, washed over me. The logical part of my brain screamed that it was a trick, a cold raid, a lucky guess, but the part of me that dreamt of the girl in the mirror, the part that wore dresses in the dark, felt a flicker of something that had been buried for a very, very long time. I didn't ask how they knew my name. I didn't question the ridiculous claim about the locket. I just pointed a trembling finger at it. "How much?" Wren named a price that was surprisingly low, almost dismissive. I paid in cash, my hands shaking so badly I could barely count the bills. They placed the locket in a small, velvet pouch as their cool fingers brushed against mine. A strange warmth spread up my arm. "Be careful," Wren said, their voice a mere whisper. "Revelation can be a painful process." I nodded, unable to speak, and fled from the shop, the little velvet pouch clutched in my hand like a lifeline. I didn't know what I had just done, or what I was about to do. I only knew that I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and I had just bought a ticket to jump. That night, my dorm room felt like a pressure cooker. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. I finished my coding assignment on autopilot, my mind a million miles away, replaying the encounter with Wren over and over. It reveals the true form of the wearer's soul. The words echoed in my head, a ridiculous, tantalizing promise. After my roommate, Mark, was sound asleep, his soft snores filling the small room, I pulled the velvet pouch from my pocket. My hands were slick with sweat. I emptied the locket into my palm. It was cool and heavy, the silver wings seeming to catch the faint moonlight filtering through the window. The chain was delicate, almost fragile. With a deep, shuddering breath, I fastened it around my neck. The metal was cold against my skin. For a moment, nothing happened. I felt a surge of disappointment, quickly followed by relief. Of course, it was just a piece of jewelry. What had I expected? A flash of light, a puff of smoke, feeling like a complete idiot. I slid under my covers and tried to force myself to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. My mind was racing, and then I felt it. It started in my chest, right where the locket lay against my sternum. It wasn't pain. Not exactly. It was a warmth, a deep, penetrating heat that began to spread outwards, radiating through my torso like ripples in a pond. My heart started to beat faster, a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. It felt like I'd just run a marathon. I sat up, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The warmth intensified, turning into a strange, tingling sensation like thousands of tiny needles pricking me from the inside out. My skin felt alive, itchy. I looked down at my arms, and my blood ran cold. The fine dark hairs that had always covered them were gone. My skin was smooth, pale in the moonlight. I frantically ran my hand over my chest, my legs, the same, smooth, unbelievably soft. A wave of panic seized me. This couldn't be happening. It was a dream, a hallucination, a stress-induced psychotic break. I scrambled out of bed, tripping over my own feet, and stumbled to the small mirror over my dresser. The face staring back at me was and was not my own. My jawline, usually sharp and defined, seemed softer, less angular. My lips, normally thin and pale, were fuller, with a natural rosy tint. And my eyes? They looked huge in my terrified face, framed by eyelashes that were suddenly darker, longer, curling slightly at the tips. It was still Alex, but a version of Alex that had been subtly, impossibly, feminized. I brought a trembling hand up to my face, touching my cheek. The skin was different, softer. There was no hint of stubble, just a smooth, uniform texture. I ran my fingers through my short brown hair, half expecting it to have grown, but it was the same. The tingling sensation moved upwards, into my shoulders. I felt a subtle shifting ache in my bones, as if my frame were being gently compressed. My shoulders, which I'd always thought of as broad and solid, felt narrower. My hands, when I held them up in front of my face, looked more delicate, my fingers longer and more slender. This wasn't a dream. This was real. My mind was a screaming vortex of terror. This was wrong, unnatural, a violation of every law of biology I knew. I should be ripping the locket off, throwing it out the window, running. But I didn't, because woven into the fabric of my panic was another thread, a bright, shimmering cord of something else entirely. It was a dizzying, intoxicating excitement, a guilty, forbidden thrill that whispered, "This is what you wanted. This is what you dreamed of." And beneath even that, deeper and quieter, was a profound, terrifying sense of peace, the constant, low-level static of wrongness that had hummed under the surface of my entire life was quiet for the first time. The body I was in didn't feel like an ill-fitting suit. Driven by an impulse I didn't understand, I crept to my closet and pulled out my secret box. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I took out the navy blue sundress. It felt different in my new slender hands. I slipped my t-shirt off. The cool air of the room on my smooth, hairless chest made me shiver, a full body tremor that was equal parts fear and pleasure. I dropped my pajama pants and stepped into the dress, pulling it up over a body that felt subtly, but fundamentally, changed. I turned to the mirror. The dress had always looked awkward on me, the fabric stretched tight across my shoulders, hanging limply from my waist. Now it draped, it settled over my narrower shoulders, hinted at a waist I didn't have before, and fell softly around my legs. I touched my own skin through the fabric, my fingertips tracing the line of my collarbone, the curve of my hip. The sensation was electric. The simple friction of cotton on skin was a revelation. It was a feeling I had read about, imagined, but never truly known. I stood there for I don't know how long, just looking, just feeling. The terror was still there. A cold knot in my stomach, but the excitement, the rightness of it all. It was winning, for the first time. The person in the mirror wasn't a man in a dress. It was something in between, something new. Eventually, the exhaustion of the emotional whiplash caught up with me. I took the dress off, folded it carefully, and slid back into bed, the locket still resting against my chest. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the cold. The locket against my skin was inert, just a piece of metal. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. I looked down at my arms. The hair was back. I ran a hand over my jaw and felt the familiar rasp of morning stubble. I lurched to the mirror, my reflection mocking me. It was just me, Alex. Broad shoulders, sharp jaw, thin lips, the same old cage. I fell back onto my bed, my body trembling. It hadn't been a dream. The memory of that smooth skin, that different face, was seared into my brain. The locket lay cold on my chest. A silent silver promise. It was real, and I knew, with a certainty that terrified me more than anything else in my life, that I was going to do it again. The first night was a fluke, an experiment born of desperate curiosity. The second night was a choice, and every night after that became a ritual, an addiction. I started living a double life, neatly bisected by the setting of the sun. By day, I was Alex, the quiet coding student, going to classes, eating in the dining hall, nodding along to Mark's conversations about sports and video games. I felt like a spy, a ghost haunting a life that was ceasing to feel like my own. The world of men, of locker room talk and casual bravado, felt more alien than ever. Every interaction was a performance. But at night, after the campus fell silent and Mark was asleep, my real life began. I would lock the door, draw the curtains, and clasp the silver locket around my neck. The transformation became familiar, but no less terrifying or exhilarating. The initial warmth, the tingling wave that washed over me, the subtle ache of my bones shifting each time I wore the locket. The changes seemed to go deeper, to last longer. The first few nights, the effects were subtle, a softening of features, a smoothness of skin, but by the end of the first week, I could see and feel a tangible difference. My chest was the most alarming and captivating change. What started as a slight sensitivity and swelling began to develop into small, distinct breasts. They were tender to the touch, and I would spend hours just looking at their shape, feeling the new weight on my chest. It felt both utterly bizarre and profoundly natural. My waist began to narrow, a subtle indentation appearing where there had been only a straight line. My hips seemed to widen slightly, giving my body a gentle, curved silhouette it had never possessed. My voice changed too. One night, I dared to speak. I expected to hear my own familiar flat tenor. But what came out was different. It was higher, softer, without the forced, cartoonish quality I'd always produced when trying to imitate a female voice. It was my voice, but perhaps refined, smoother. I started practicing, whispering phrases to my reflection, learning the new cadence and pitch of my own speech. The girl in the mirror was becoming less like a feminized version of me and more like a person in her own right. She needed a name. Alex felt wrong, like a heavy coat I was forced to wear. I thought back to the dream, the girl with the honey-colored hair. She looked like she could be an Alyssa. The name felt right. It was soft, pretty, and a world away from the hard, clipped sound of Alex. I started a journal, a cheap spiral notebook I kept hidden with my dress. It was the only place I could be honest. October 12th. It happened again. The changes are more pronounced this time. My breasts are small, but they're really there. I can feel them press against my shirt. It's the strangest feeling. When I look in the mirror, I see her, I see Alyssa. I tried on the dress, and it fits even better now. For a few hours, I wasn't Alex. I was free. The shame is still there, lurking in the corners. But it's getting quieter. The feeling of rightness is getting louder. October 17th, I bought a wig, a cheap one from a costume shop downtown. It's the same honey brown color as the girl in my dreams. The second I put it on, I almost cried. That was her. That was the face from the mirror. I also bought lipstick, a simple nude pink. My hand was shaking so much I could barely apply it. But when I was done, I looked complete. I looked beautiful. I've never thought that about myself before. As Alex, I never even considered the word. As Alyssa, it feels possible. October 22nd. The mornings are the worst, when the locket goes cold and my body reverts. It's not just a return to normal anymore. It's a physical ordeal. It feels like my whole body is being stretched and pulled back into a shape that doesn't fit. My muscles ache. My skin feels raw and too tight. It's a violent, jarring process. I spend the first hour of every day feeling hungover and disoriented, mourning the loss of her. Being Alex is starting to feel like the costume. The duality was tearing me apart. I'd walk through campus as Alex, feeling heavy and clumsy in my own skin. I'd see girls laughing with their friends, their movements fluid and effortless, and a sharp pang of envy would pierce through me. They were living a reality that I could only access in secret, in the dark of my dorm room. One night, something shifted. I was standing in front of the mirror as Alyssa, wearing the wig and a new silk blouse I dared to buy online. I was just observing, tracing the new lines of my face. I wasn't smiling. My expression was neutral, contemplative. And then, in the mirror, Alyssa's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. I froze, my heart stopping in my chest. I hadn't moved. My own face was still perfectly still. But my reflection, she had smiled. It was a subtle, fleeting thing. But I saw it. I saw it clear as day. A voice, slick and feminine, echoed in the silent space of my mind. It was my own internal monologue, but it wasn't my voice. It was hers. "Did you really think this was just a game? Alex, did you think you were just playing dress-up?" The words were not hostile, but they were chilling. They were a statement of fact. Alyssa wasn't just a persona I was putting on, she was real, an entity, a consciousness. That was growing stronger every night. The locket wasn't just changing my body, it was awakening a part of my soul that had been dormant for years, and she was tired of living in the shadows. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my chest, to the locket, the boundary between Alex and Alyssa. The safe wall I had built between my two lives had just crumbled into dust. I wasn't in control anymore. I wasn't sure I ever had been. The end of the semester was a blur of caffeine-fueled study sessions and stressful final exams. I barely had time to eat, let alone sleep. The nightly transformations became my only escape, the only time I felt a sense of peace amidst the chaos. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. The whiplash of shifting between two bodies, two identities, was taking its toll. Alex was a shell, an automaton going through the motions. Alyssa was the only one who felt real, alive. The night after my last final, I stumbled back to my dorm room feeling utterly hollowed out. Mark had already packed up and left for winter break. The room was eerily silent, half empty. I didn't even have the energy to change. I collapsed onto my bed, the weight of the semester, of my entire life, crushing me. My fingers fumbled with the clasp of the locket. It had become a nervous habit, a source of comfort. I fastened it around my neck, the cool metal a familiar touch against my exhausted skin. I didn't intend to transform, not really. I just wanted the comfort of its presence. I closed my eyes, just for a second, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke to the pale, gray light of morning filtering through the blinds. My first thought was that I was late for an exam, but then the relief of being finished washed over me. I stretched, a long, satisfying stretch, and that's when I noticed it. Something was wrong. My clothes, the jeans and hoodie I'd fallen asleep in, felt huge. They were baggy, hanging off my frame in a way they never had before. A strange weight rested on my chest, and something soft was tickling my cheek. I reached up and my fingers brushed against long, silky strands of hair, my hair. A cold dread, sharp and absolute, sliced through the morning grogginess. I threw the covers off and looked down at myself. The body lying in my bed was not the body of Alex. It was slender, curved. I saw the gentle swell of breast pressing against the fabric of my hoodie, the noticeable curve of a hip under the denim of my jeans. "No," I whispered, and the sound that came from my own throat stopped my heart. It was a voice I had only heard in the privacy of my room at night. It was soft, clear, and unmistakably female. It was Alyssa's voice. I scrambled out of bed, the oversized clothes tangling around my new, smaller form. I half ran, half stumbled to the mirror over my dresser, my breath catching in my throat. There was no trace of Alex left. The face staring back at me was hers. The honey brown hair, no longer a wig but my own, cascaded over my shoulders. The eyes, wan and terrified, were framed by long, dark lashes. The lips, full and pink, were parted in a silent gasp. My body was completely, entirely female. The soft curves, the narrow waist, the gentle flare of my hips. It was the body I had come to know in secret. But now it was here, in the harsh light of day, and it wasn't going away. My hands flew to my neck, searching for the locket, for the source of this nightmare, this miracle. But it wasn't there. Not exactly. My fingers found the spot on my sternum where the locket always rested, but instead of cool metal, I felt only skin. I looked down, fused into my flesh, as if it had melted and become part of me, was a small, silver mark, the shape of open wings. It shimmered faintly, a permanent, indelible scar. The first wave that hit me was pure, unadulterated panic. My mind screamed, "This is permanent. This is irreversible. My life is over." I clawed at the silver mark on my chest, my nails scraping against my own skin. But it was useless. It was a part of me now. I backed away from the mirror, hyperventilating, my vision tunneling. What would I do? Where would I go? My ID, my school records, my entire existence was tied to a person who no longer existed. Alex was gone. But as the tidal wave of fear began to recede, it left something unexpected in its wake, a strange and profound calm. The war was over. The constant, grinding conflict between who I was and who I was pretending to be had finally ended. There was no more switching back, no more painful reversions, no more hiding. This was it. This was me. Still trembling, I walked to Alex's closet. I pulled out one of his old t-shirts and a pair of boxers. My movements were slow, deliberate. I took off the ridiculously large hoodie and jeans and put on his clothes. Then I turned back to the mirror. The sight that greeted me solidified everything. I saw a girl, a sad, lost-looking girl, drowning in clothes that were clearly not hers. The masculine shell didn't fit. It looked comical, wrong, a poorly chosen costume. I wasn't a man trapped in a woman's body. I was a woman who had, for 20 years, been trapped in a man's. A single tear traced a path down my cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sadness or fear. It was a tear of release, of recognition. In that moment, looking at the girl in the mirror wearing a boy's clothes, I understood. Alex hadn't been erased. He had been a cocoon, a necessary, painful stage of my life that I had finally, irrevocably, emerged from. From that moment on, Alyssa was born, not in secret, not in the dark, but in the cold, unforgiving light of a new day. My old life was over. My real one was just beginning. My first phone call was to Megan. My hands were shaking so violently I had to dial her number 3 times. I didn't know what I was going to say. How do you even begin a conversation like that? "Hey, Megan, funny story, I'm a girl now." She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and groggy. "Alex, what's up? I thought you'd be halfway home by now." The name felt like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to speak, but only a choked sob came out. "Whoa, Alex, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Her voice was sharp with concern now. I need you to come to my dorm," I managed to whisper, my voice cracking. "Please, something's happened." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said without hesitation. Those 20 minutes were the longest of my life. I paced the small room, wringing my hands, my thoughts racing. What if she screamed? What if she called the police? Or a psychiatrist? Megan was my only friend, my only anchor in a world that had just been turned completely upside down. If I lost her, I would be truly, utterly alone. When she knocked on the door, I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a deep, shuddering breath and opened it. Megan stood there, her car keys dangling from her finger, a worried frown on her face. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, and the frown dissolved into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. She saw the long hair, the soft face, the curves hidden under Alex's baggy t-shirt. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She was speechless. Tears streamed down my face. "It's me, Megan," I cried, my voice barely a whisper. "It's Alex." She just stared for a long moment, her brain clearly trying to process the impossible sight in front of her. I could see the confusion, the disbelief warring in her eyes. I braced myself for the rejection, the fear. But then, she looked past the changed body, past the new face, and into my eyes. She saw the same terrified person she'd been friends with for years. Her expression softened. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and then she did something that saved my life. She wrapped her arms around me and held me tight as I sobbed into her shoulder. "It's okay," she murmured, her hand stroking my long hair. "Whatever this is, we'll figure it out. It's okay." We sat on my bed for hours as I told her everything, the words pouring out of me in a frantic, jumbled rush. The dream, the secret obsession, the shop, Ren, the locket, the nightly transformations, and finally, waking up like this, she listened patiently, never interrupting, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. She didn't call me crazy, she didn't doubt me, she just believed me. When I was finally done, exhausted and emotionally raw, she just nodded slowly. "So Alex is gone." "I think so," I said, my voice small. "I feel like I'm Alyssa now." "Alyssa," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. A small smile touched her lips. "Okay, Alyssa, it suits you." She looked at me, really looked at me, and her smile widened. "So, Alyssa, if this is who you need to be, then I'm here. What's the first step?" Her immediate, unwavering acceptance was a bigger miracle than the locket itself. For the first time since waking up, I felt a flicker of hope. The first step was a makeover. Megan declared that Alex's wardrobe had to go. She took me to her apartment, a cozy, bright space that felt like a sanctuary. She went through her own closet, pulling out clothes for me to try. The first outfit she handed me was a simple pair of skinny jeans and a soft lavender-colored sweater. Looking at myself in her full-length mirror was a revelation. The jeans hugged my new hips, and the sweater draped beautifully over my small breasts. For the first time, I was wearing clothes that fit my body, that were meant for it. Megan then sat me down in front of her vanity. "Time for Alyssa 101, she announced cheerfully. For the next hour, she became my guide to a world I had only ever observed from a distance. She showed me how to apply foundation, the cool, liquid feel of it on my skin. She taught me the steady hand required for eyeliner, the soft dusting of blush on the apples of my cheeks, the smell of the makeup, the feel of the soft brushes against my skin. It was an intensely intimate, grounding experience. When she was done, she turned me to face the mirror. A complete stranger stared back at me. And yet, I had never seen anyone more familiar. The makeup didn't feel like a mask. It felt like a final touch-up, something that brought the real me into focus. I looked pretty. I started to cry, not from fear or sadness, but from a profound, overwhelming sense of recognition. "This is me," I whispered. "This is really me." Over the next few weeks of winter break, Megan's apartment became my chrysalis. She taught me everything. We practiced walking, a subtle shift in posture and gait that made me feel more graceful. We worked on my voice, not changing it, but helping me find a natural, confident tone. We went shopping. I felt a thrill of terror and excitement walking into the women's section of a department store for the first time. Megan was my shield, chatting away, making it all seem perfectly normal. I learned the language of fabric, the way silk felt against my new, sensitive skin, the comfortable stretch of good denim, the playful swish of a meaty skirt around my knees. I bought a pair of low-heeled ankle boots and felt a surge of power with the extra inch of height and the solid click they made on the pavement. Every new piece of clothing, every new sensation was another brick in the foundation of my new identity. We needed a story, a plausible explanation for my existence. That's when Megan had her brilliant idea. "My cousin," she said one evening, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Alyssa Monroe. She's transferring here for the spring semester to be closer to family. She's a little shy, but she's brilliant." It was perfect. We spent days creating a backstory, building a new identity from scratch, with Megan's help. I navigated the bureaucratic nightmare of getting a new driver's license and changing my school records, using a combination of forged documents and exploiting legal loopholes for gender changes. Slowly, methodically, Alex was erased, and Alyssa was born into the world. Not just in body, but on paper. The cage was gone, and for the first time, I was learning how to fly. The spring semester began, and with it, my public debut as Alyssa. Walking onto campus was one of the most terrifying things I had ever done. Every glance felt like an accusation, every whisper a confirmation of my fraudulence. I was convinced that everyone could see right through me. That man in a dress was tattooed on my forehead, but Megan, my ever-present guardian angel, stayed by my side, her cheerful chatter a buffer against my anxiety. And to my astonishment, no one seemed to notice, or if they did, they didn't care. I was just another student, a new face in the crowd. We developed a routine. Between classes, we'd go to a small, off-campus coffee shop called The Daily Grind. It was a cozy place with mismatched furniture, the smell of roasted coffee beans and old books hanging in the air. It became my safe haven, and it was there that I met Liam. He was a barista, a student working part-time. He had kind, gentle eyes the color of smoky blue, and a smile that seemed to reach them every time. The first time I ordered from him, my voice came out as a nervous squeak. I felt my cheeks flush hot with embarrassment, and I couldn't meet his gaze. "First time here?" he asked, his voice warm and friendly. I just nodded, my eyes fixed on the counter. Well, welcome. The caramel latte is our specialty, if you need a recommendation. That sounds nice, I stammered. When he handed me the cup, our fingers brushed for a fraction of a second. A jolt, like a tiny burst of static electricity, shot up my arm. It was so unexpected, so intense, that I almost dropped the cup. My head snapped up, and my eyes met his. He was smiling that easy, genuine smile. "Enjoy," he said, already turning to the next customer. I scurried back to my table where Megan was waiting, my heart pounding in my ears. "What was that?" she asked, a knowing grin spreading across her face. "Nothing," I said, a little too quickly, but it wasn't nothing. It was the first time anyone, other than Megan, had looked at me, at Alyssa, and just seen a girl. It was also the first time I had felt that kind of spark, as Alex. I'd never been interested in dating. My own identity was too confused, too chaotic. But this feeling, this was new, and it was terrifying. The daily grind became a non-negotiable part of our day. I told myself it was because I liked the coffee, but I knew I was lying. I went to see Liam. Our interactions grew from polite transactions to short conversations. He learned my name and my order. He started drawing a little heart in the foam of my latte. I learned that he was an English major, that he loved old movies, and that he had a goofy golden retriever named Buster. With every conversation, the knot of anxiety in my stomach loosened a little. I found myself smiling more, my voice growing more confident. Liam never looked at me with anything but warmth and genuine interest. He made me feel normal. He made me feel seen. One rainy afternoon, the shop was nearly empty. As Liam handed me my latte, he didn't let go of the cup right away. "You know," he said, his voice a little lower than usual, "you have the most beautiful eyes. They're kind of sad, but in a really captivating way." My breath hitched, my entire body flushed with heat. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. I was so flustered I couldn't think of a single thing to say. I just mumbled a thank you and fled back to my table, my cheeks burning. From my seat, I watched him work, a small smile playing on my lips. I was beginning to realize that my body, this new female body, wasn't just a physical shell. It came with a whole new set of responses, of feelings. The way my heart fluttered when Liam smiled at me, the blush that spread across my chest, the electric jolt from a simple touch my body and my heart were reacting as a girl's, as my own. That evening, as Megan and I were packing up to leave, I saw a familiar figure sitting in a shadowed corner booth. It was Wren. They were nursing a cup of tea, their pale silver eyes fixed on me. My blood ran cold. I hadn't seen them since the day I bought the locket. I walked over to their table, my legs feeling unsteady. Megan gave me a confused look but stayed behind. "Hello, Alyssa," Wren said, their voice the same calm. Androgynous hum, I remembered. It didn't surprise me that they knew my new name. "What are you doing here?" I whispered. "Observing," they replied, taking a slow sip of tea. "The locket did its work, I see." "It changed me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. Wren shook their head slowly. "No, it didn't change you. It revealed you. There's a difference." They set their cup down and looked at me with that unnerving, all-seeing gaze. Magic only clarifies what already exists. The locket just gave your soul permission to reshape the clay. They paused, their eyes flicking over to where Liam was wiping down the counter, humming softly to himself. "You're building a new life," Wren continued. "It's a fragile thing. A word of advice. Don't cling to the ghost of Alex. Don't try to keep a part of him alive out of guilt or nostalgia. You can't be two people at once. If you try, you'll tear yourself apart with him." And with that, they stood up, placed a few dollars on the table, and walked out of the coffee shop, disappearing into the evening mist. Wren's words echoed in my head, a cryptic but potent warning. I had been so focused on becoming Alyssa that I hadn't thought about what it meant to truly let Alex go. I was about to find out. Wren's warning lingered in my mind for days. Don't cling to the ghost of Alex. I realized they were right. While I was living as Alyssa, a part of my old life was still sitting in limbo, packed away in boxes in my old dorm room. Mark had moved out at the end of the fall semester, and the university had let me keep the single room. Assuming Alex would be back after winter break, I'd been paying the rent, telling myself I needed to figure out what to do with my things. But the truth was, I was scared. Going back to that room felt like visiting a graveyard. Megan insisted I couldn't put it off any longer. "You need to clean it out," she said gently but firmly. "It's the last piece. You need closure." So, one Saturday afternoon, armed with empty boxes and a roll of packing tape, we went back. The moment I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the air hit me like a physical force. It was stale, heavy with the scent of Alex, his cheap cologne, the faint smell of old textbooks and dusty electronics. It was the smell of a life I no longer lived. Everything was exactly as he had left it. A pile of hoodies on a chair, a stack of programming manuals on the desk, a half-finished video game paused on the monitor. It was a perfectly preserved diorama of a person who didn't exist anymore. A wave of nausea and vertigo washed over me. I was an intruder here. This wasn't my space. I was Alyssa, in my midi skirt and heeled boots, and I was standing in the last bastion of Alex's world. It felt profoundly wrong. Megan, sensing my distress, put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "One box at a time," she said softly. "We can do this." We worked in silence for a while, a strange, somber rhythm filling the room. Megan sorted through books and papers, while I went through the closet. I folded Alex's t-shirts, his jeans, his sweaters. The rough, utilitarian fabrics felt alien in my hands. These were the clothes that had felt like a cage, the uniform of my imprisonment. Each item I placed in a box felt like a final goodbye to a part of my past. I was reaching for a stack of sweatshirts on the top shelf when the door to the room swung open. My blood turned to ice. Standing in the doorway, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, was Mark, my old roommate. He must have left something behind. He stared at us, his brow furrowed in confusion. Sorry, I think I have the wrong room." He glanced at the number on the door, then back at us. "No, this is 3B. Who are you? Where's Alex?" Megan immediately stepped forward, putting herself between me and him. "Oh, hi, you must be Mark," she said, her voice impossibly bright and casual. "I'm Megan, Alex's friend, and this is my cousin, Alyssa. Alex asked us to pack up his stuff for him. He transferred to a school back home, a family thing." It was a brilliant, quick-thinking lie, but I wasn't listening. The moment Mark said Alex's name, my fight-or-flight response kicked into overdrive. I did the only thing I could think of. I dove into the closet and pulled the door shut, plunging myself into darkness. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I pressed myself against the back wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. The small space was suffocating, filled with the smell of old wood, mothballs, and Alex's clothes. My silk skirt snagged on a hanger. I could feel the rough texture of a wool coat pressing against my bare arm. I was literally back in the closet, a place I thought I had left forever. I could hear their muffled voices through the door. Mark sounded confused, asking questions. Megan was a master of deflection, keeping her voice light, steering the conversation. "Yeah, it was really sudden," I heard her say. "He just packed a bag and left. He's doing okay, though. Just busy." Then I heard Mark sigh. "Man, that's crazy. I wish I could have said bye. Can you tell him I hope he's doing good?" He paused. I heard the sound of his laptop bag hitting the desk. "Let me just grab my old hard drive. I'll be out of your hair." I held my breath, praying he would hurry. Through the thin slats of the closet door, I could see a sliver of the room. I saw him sit down at Alex's desk, powering on the laptop. The screen illuminated his face. "Come on, man," he muttered to the screen. "Where are you?" He clicked the mouse a few times, then called out, as if expecting an answer. "Alex, you out there, man." Hearing him say that name, in that room, directed at a person who was hiding in the closet just a few feet away, broke something inside me. A silent hot tear slid down my cheek, then another. He was calling for a ghost, a person who I had been, but would never be again. And in that moment, I knew, with absolute certainty, that for Alyssa to truly live, Alex had to die, not just disappear, but be mourned and let go, like any other loss. The tears fell freely now, a quiet, desperate grief for the boy I used to be, and an overwhelming sense of relief for the woman I had become. After what felt like an eternity, Mark found his hard drive, said a quick goodbye to Megan, and left the moment the door clicked shut. I stumbled out of the closet, gasping for air. Megan rushed to my side. "Are you okay?" I just nodded, wiping the tears from my face. I looked around the half-packed room, at the remnants of a life that wasn't mine. I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. Ren was right, I couldn't be both. The choice had already been made for me, but now I was making it for myself. We finished packing in a quiet reverence. As I sealed the last box, I ran my hand over the cardboard. "Goodbye, Alex," I whispered to the empty room. "Thank you. Thank you for getting me here. Thank you for letting me exist." When we walked out of that dorm for the last time, I didn't look back. I was leaving a ghost behind. And finally, I was free. A year can change everything. It's enough time for seasons to turn, for wounds to scar over, for a new life to take root and begin to blossom. 1 year after I walked out of Alex's dorm room for the last time, I was a different person, living a different life. I had changed my major. The rigid logic of computer science no longer appealed to me. It felt like a language from another country, a part of Alex's world that I had no desire to revisit, on a whim. I had taken an introductory art history class, and something clicked. The stories behind the paintings, the emotion captured in stone, the way art reflected the soul of its time, it resonated with me. With Alyssa, I had found a new passion, a new path that was entirely my own. My hair was longer now, falling in soft waves past my shoulders. I had learned to move in the world with a confidence that had once seemed impossible. I no longer flinched when I heard my own name. I smiled at strangers. I walked with my head held high, not in defiance but in simple, peaceful acceptance of who I was. And then there was Liam. Our coffee shop conversations had blossomed into something more. He had eventually, nervously, asked me out on a date, then another, and another. He was kind, patient, and funny, and he looked at me with an adoration that still made my heart flutter. He didn't know my whole story, not yet. He just knew me as Alyssa, the girl with the sad, beautiful eyes who loved art and caramel lattes, and for now, that was enough. He was falling in love with the person I truly was, with no ghosts or secrets between us. One warm autumn evening, he took me to a small park near campus. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything. The leaves on the trees were brilliant shades of red and orange. We sat on a bench, his hand holding mine, our fingers intertwined. The simple, solid warmth of his touch was a constant, comforting presence in my life. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, about his classes, about a painting I was studying, about his dog's latest ridiculous antic. The conversation flowed easily, comfortably, in his presence. I felt completely at ease, completely myself. As the sky deepened to a bruised purple and the old-fashioned park lamps flickered on, a comfortable silence fell between us. Liam turned to face me, his smoky blue eyes serious in the soft, yellow light. "Alyssa," he said, his voice quiet but full of emotion. He reached up and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers warm against my skin. "There's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time." My heart began to beat a little faster. "I've never met anyone like you," he continued, his gaze so intense it felt like he could see straight into my soul. "You're smart, and you're kind, and you see the world in a way that's so beautiful and unique. Being with you, it makes everything better." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Alyssa." The words hung in the air between us, perfect and shimmering. I love you. He loved me, Alyssa, not the idea of me, not a version of me, but the woman I had become. Tears welled in my eyes, but for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. He must have mistaken my tears for something else, because a worried look crossed his face. But I just smiled, a real radiant smile that came from the very core of my being. "I love you too, Liam," I whispered. He leaned in, and his lips met mine. The kiss was everything I had never known I wanted. It was gentle, tender, and full of a quiet, certain passion. It wasn't rushed or demanding. It was a kiss of acceptance, of homecoming, In that moment, with his arms around me and the golden lamplight bathing us in its glow, I felt completely whole. And then, something strange happened. I felt a faint, warm tingling on my chest, right over my heart. It was the same sensation I used to feel when the locket's magic began. I pulled back from the kiss slightly, a flicker of old fear passing through me. As I watched, the small silver scar on my sternum, the fused wings of the locket, began to glow with a soft, white light. The light intensified for a moment and then, with a final gentle pulse, it faded. I looked down at my chest. The skin was smooth, unblemished. The scar, the last physical remnant of my transformation, was gone. Lying on the ground at my feet, nestled in the grass, was the silver locket. It was whole again, the delicate chain pulled around it, gleaming in the lamplight. Its magic was finished. Its purpose had been served. It had revealed the truth. And now, that truth was real, permanent, and needed no magical reinforcement. I looked from the locket on the ground to the wonderful man sitting beside me, his face full of love and concern, and then I looked inside myself. The war was over. The cage was broken. The ghost was at peace. There was no more Alex, no more magic. There was only Alyssa. Tears streamed down my face again, but I was smiling, laughing through them. Liam looked confused, but he just gently wiped them away with his thumb. "I love you, Liam," I said again, my voice clear and strong. And I love myself. For the very first time in my life, I think I actually love myself. The magic hadn't been in the locket, not really. The magic was in acceptance. The power was in love. The girl from my dreams, the one with the honey-brown hair and trembling lips, was no longer just a reflection in a steamy mirror. She was me, and she was finally, truly, gloriously alive.